Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming out tonight for our Women's History Month panel. I think this is going to be a great discussion because we have some fabulous panelists that I'll introduce in a second here. My name is Julie Alexander. My official role here is Director of Accessibility and Disability Services, but I'm also the Acting President and Programming Coordinator for Ferris Women's Network and the advisor for the Feminist Majority Leadership Alliance, FMLA. And so on behalf of both of those groups, thank you all so much for being here. I would say both Ferris Women's Network and FMLA probably share a lot of similar missions and goals. We want to make Ferris a place that is welcoming and inclusive for all genders. And so we put on events like this to try to reach that goal. So again, thank you for being here. So our lovely panelists that we have, I'll introduce each of them, starting with Dr. Tracy Busch. Tracy Ann Busch was raised by a single mother and grew up in a small town in Ohio. She earned her BA from Vassar College in 1991 and a PhD from Georgetown University in 2004. She teaches a wide variety of classes at Ferris, including world history, Russian history, examining stereotypes, American women's history, and global women's activism. Woohoo. In 2019, she received the Distinguished Teacher and International Educator Awards. In 2022, she received the Helen Gillespie Ferris Distinguished Women Leader Award, one that FWN has the honor of awarding. Since 2013, Tracy and a group of collaborators from across campus worked to create and curate the Ferris Museum of Sexist Objects, or MOSO, the only museum of its kind. As the lead faculty for the MOSO, she collaborates with a variety of groups on campus and in the community, including the Association of University Women, AAUW, Feminist Majority Leadership Alliance, FMLA, the Ferris Women's Network, all of those. In addition to her teaching duties and MOSO work, she is also the director of the Ferris State Shoah Committee, which does important work in genocide awareness and prevention. So thank you so much, Tracy, for being here. Next up, and my apologies, I'm a little scattered with the bios. I let them sit where they wanted. And so now I have to search.
Power up here.
Now I have to search for the bios. Okay, so Kate O'Connor is the interim dean for the College of Engineering Technology and held the role of associate professor of architecture at Ferris State University. Previously, she was the associate director for the School of Architecture at Marywood University in Scranton, Pennsylvania. She opened her first architectural design firm in Vail, Colorado? Yeah. And moved to New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina struck to assist with the rebuilding of the city. That experience inspired her to practice and teach socially responsible architecture, creating an architecture that understands real human needs, such as economic stimulation and social consciousness, and balances design with environmental awareness for the betterment of the individual and ultimately the community. She strongly believes that the role of the architect can have an influential impact on society and challenges the profession to become leaders who can solve the very complicated problems of society today. Her TEDx talk, Everyone Deserves Good Design, engages students to embrace the holistic approach to design by addressing the environmental, economic, and social empowerment of design that speaks to how the project would engage and serve the public good. These values are reflected in her leadership style, where Kate advocates for collaboration, transparency, and inclusivity, aiming to power faculty, staff, and students while promoting a culture of continuous improvement and shared governance. All right, so welcome, Kate. All right, and then we have Mary Emerson. Mary Emerson has lived and worked in Mecosta County for more than 24 years, raising 2 children with her husband, Ron. Employed by Blue Triton Brands, formerly Nestle Waters, for 22 years, Mary currently serves as a customer-facing supply chain manager, collaborating with customers across the country, including interfacing with 29 retail manufacturing locations. Prior to her time at Blue Triton Brands, Mary spent 14 years at Electronic Data Systems in Southeast Michigan as a senior business analyst focused on data processing. Mary graduated from Rutgers University, Douglas College with a BA in economics. Throughout her career, Mary has placed strong emphasis on mentorship and the promotion of women in leadership. Representing her company as a member of the Next Up, formerly Network of Executive Women, Western Michigan region for over a decade, as well as being an active member of the Women of Blue Triton Business Resource Group. Mary also takes an active role in community, serving as the treasurer of the General Federation of Women's Club Mecosta, Heart of the Lakes, an organization dedicated to community improvement by enhancing the lives of others through volunteer service. She is a faith leader in her church, an active volunteer on community improvement projects, and an avid participant in community clubs, including her local book club. In her downtime, she enjoys walks with the family dog, time on lakes, and everything else involving Michigan's blue outdoors. So welcome, Mary. All right. And last but definitely not least, we have the fabulous Sonia Trevino. Sonia Trevino is the director of the Hispanic Latino Cultural Center with Ferris State University. She leads diverse, inclusive programming that highlights and celebrates the Hispanic Latino culture to provide an educationally immersive experience for Ferris State students and our community partnerships throughout West Michigan. Sonia has demonstrated exceptional, proven leadership and experience to this role following 7 years as a member of the faculty and chair of the Behavioral and Social Sciences Department at Texas Southmost College. Sonia was awarded Professor of the Year by Criminal Justice students in 2015, an award reflective of her passion for and commitment to educational excellence. She holds a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from the University of Texas Brownsville, a master's of science in criminal justice from the University of Texas Pan American, postgraduate coursework from the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, and is completing a doctorate of community college leadership at Ferris State University. Sonia also serves Ferris State as advisor to Gamma Phi Omega, Lambda Theta Phi, the Asian Student Organization, and sits on a variety of university committees. So thank you for being here, Sonia. Welcome. All right, and then finally, I'm going to quickly introduce our fantastic moderator today, Jessica Oakes. Jessica Oakes is a senior studying technical communication with a minor in history. Starting as a news reporter in 2021, she worked her way up the Ferris State torch to become this year's editor-in-chief. Outside of her work and her studies, she also co-founded Ferris Feminist Majority Leadership Alliance. She represents the group in student government as their external community chair. So let's give a big hand for all of these amazing women that we have. I'm gonna turn it over to Jessica Oakes.
Thank you, Julie. And thank you to our panelists for being here. Thank you to everyone who came. This was a combination of efforts from Ferris Women's Network. I, of course, work for the Torch, and I wanted to do something to honor Women's History Month, but also to do something with digital media and in audiences, which is something that's not super well acquainted with the Torch right now. So thank you so much for offering your wisdom during this. We do have some questions for today, of course. I'm used to more extemporaneous interviewing, but I will stick to our list today. If anything in our discussion seems relevant to a later question in this list, would anyone be opposed if I picked from a later question to keep things flowing? Okay, great. Everyone on this panel has a very different toolbox, different resume, different experiences. So if you have something in your story and you want to answer, just answer away. And we'll start with question number 1. What or who inspired each of you to become a leader, and how did they do that for you?
I think we should start at that end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. I think I had a variety of strong, both strong women and strong male leaders that influenced me. I have worked under some administrators that have just been wonderfully supportive, and I've been very fortunate to be able to be surrounded just by just a lot of support. I don't think I've ever had an idea that was really told, no, you can't do that, or we can't support that. All my mentors, my supervisors have just been wonderfully supportive. And I think if I could pinpoint it to one individual, I would definitely pinpoint it back to an individual psychology instructor, professor named Dr. Deborah Huerta. She is now a professor with Our Lady of the Lake in San Antonio, Texas. And she served as the Dean of Humanities at my previous institution. And it was under her leadership that I was made department chair and then moved along the lines. And she showed me a lot of how to really handle tough situations, but how to handle them with a level of grace and a level of just professionalism, and understanding that we're all there to serve the students, and understanding that at the end of the day, that's what we're there to do. And so while I had a variety of great mentors, and I still do to this day, now that I have my new home here at Ferris State, it's just been, I've been very, very fortunate to have a wide range of both men and women. But if I had to pick one, it would definitely be Dr. Deborah Huerta.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Is that relatable to anyone else, having a strong support system growing up?
Oh, absolutely. I was an oldest child, right? So that leadership kind of starts in the family when you're an oldest, because you're mentoring all of the younger ones and helping out. I would say though, my mother, she did not work outside the home, but I think her leadership of the family, the love and support that I got from her from the very beginning, as such a great mom, gave me the confidence, along with that leadership of being the oldest in the family. And one of the things that I say, my mom did not get further education. But she encouraged, it was kind of the time when women were really starting to get into the work world big time, and she took us to the library all the time. So even though my world was small, she had 5 kids and a busy mom, I was exposed to, so much through reading, and the women that wrote these books, the stories that I heard, that I think that gave me a lot of my aspirations. And one thing when I was thinking about this was, I must have read Little Women just a bazillion times. I had this little abridged copy my sister and I had that I still have to this day. And then I went on to read the longer version. But I kind of was thinking Jo March, as one of, and she was Josephine, but called herself Jo. And, she was a woman, but she was also a leader, and all that she did, I think that was probably an inspiration from my early time on. And as far as mentors, I've had great mentors throughout my 36-year career. I've been very lucky, and a lot have helped along the way. But I think that early start really is what put me on the road to leadership.
Beautiful. I think there's a showing of Little Women on campus this month soon, so Jo is still inspiring.
Greta's?
Awesome. Yes, it's the 2019 version. Greta's. What about you, Kate?
Well, I do have to say that my parents are in the audience, so it was all my parents, and that's it. No, I'm kidding. It's actually very true. By kin, we're Jersey girls, so yes. I think that my parents were very instrumental in always empowering me. I'm the oldest as well. I think that my parents are probably still wondering how I actually made it to be 54, because my younger brother and sister are a lot more responsible than I never will be, but that's okay. But I think it's because they always treated each of us with respect and really encouraged curiosity as well. There was no such thing as being punished for failure, and that really helped me decide what I wanted to do, especially through design. There's always multiple answers, multiple ways to get there, and I think having that support system was instrumental in making this, who I am today. As far as leadership, I started my own firm when I was 30. I was very young. I was advised against it. I had learned a lot of what not to do, and I have grit and tenacity, and I had a wonderful mentor, Jim Mortar, who unfortunately just passed away in October, and he encouraged me splitting from his firm and working on my own, which he could have seen me as competition, but rather he saw me as co-opetition, and that was a really, really valuable lesson, the one that I try to instill in all of my leadership, whether it's in the classroom with my students and empowering and educating my students, or in the role that I'm in now as well. So I think that those are really what's led. Those are the ideologies and the individuals who have led me to where I am today.
Love to see the support still here to this
Yeah,
day.
my
Yes.
posse.
Awesome.
Front row.
That is so great. I think we should create an older sister collective here, because I'm also the oldest.
There you go.
Yeah, the oldest daughter. So yeah, it's really something. I think the responsibility that we get on our shoulders as the oldest, and I was a single mom, as I put in the bio, because I think that also, I think being the oldest and having a single mom and having to do a lot of everything. For example, I cut the wood, I dug the garden, I mowed the lawn. So when I got married and my husband's like, oh, I should mow the lawn. I'm like, why? It just didn't make any sense. And I think that's really, there's positives and negatives with that. But one of the positives is that these gender roles and gender expectations, were non-existent for me. So I think that was very freeing. And then the opportunity to go to Vassar College, was also, because they expect the women there to be leaders. It's just expected, and all the leadership positions in the administration were all occupied by women. Women president, women provost, women deans, the whole thing. And it was like a whole nother kind of alternate reality. And I thought, well, if it's true there, it can be true anywhere. So I took that with me out into the real world and thought, of course women should lead. They always have, they always will. I come from a really strong female line too, all the great-grandmother, grandmother, mother, me. And I'm so glad when I had 2 daughters, because I like to keep that female line going. And even though names pass, father to son, usually, traditionally, right? Because we're stuck in this patriarchy web that we're in. I just knew, I knew all their names, and I knew I was a part of them. It was very strong. So I have that behind me as well. And then once I got out into, schools, I was not a leader person. I was very shy. I didn't want to be, to the extent even when I first got my PhD, I was first teaching at the University of Maryland, University College. I walked into the classroom and the students all came in, and I wanted to just sit down in the front row with them. I was like, maybe the real professor will walk in and I'll be off the hook. It's hard for me every single time. But I think, doing Girl Scouts and being a leader, being the president of my troop, which is small potatoes, and being a runner and having to be captain of the team, easy stuff like that. It's like, okay, I kind of like this. I get to lead the stretches, 1, 2. So yeah, I started low stakes, and then usually I don't want to be the leader. It's that I see something that needs to be done, so I do it. I'm like, really, we should be doing this. well, who's going to do it? I guess it's me. You know, it ends up that kind of de facto. And then when you get in the habit of being a leader, you kind of keep going. Like, oh, well, I could do this, and I could do that. Like the SHOA committee thing came up last year. I'm like, I really have some ideas about how to run that SHOA committee. Goody, I get to try it, right? But it didn't start out that way. I was a very, very shy person when I was younger, and I had to really work up to it. So if you're shy right now and you're young, no worries. You have plenty of time to become a leader.
I think your long line of strong female leaders is continuing from the stories I've heard of your daughters.
Oh yeah.
And your story of leadership kind of happening to you, because you just do. That's such a familiar story. And I saw panelists nodding along, so I think that's a great segue. Did you, panelists, always feel like a leader? Or did you at sometimes feel like maybe an imposter and you didn't know how you got to where you are now? You can start that with.
It's hard for me to talk about myself because I feel like in my culture, it's very much like you're taught to be humble, and if you talk about your experiences, like it's a form of bragging. So I struggle with that. But if I'm going to answer honestly, I've always felt like a leader. I was a leader in my peer group. I was even a cheerleader forever. So I've always been kind of in my social circle, kind of me and maybe my best friend were always kind of leading the little pack. I was really active in high school and extracurricular activities. But I felt that I was able to do that in a way that people were really, I made people feel comfortable. And I know that because I was voted class clown of my high school class of about 500 students. And then when I was in 8th grade, I was voted most likely to succeed in my class. So I'm like, how did I go from that to class clown? And then later I ran into a teacher of mine, and she said, you've always made people laugh and feel comfortable, but you have those leadership capabilities. And I kind of knew that was there, and I felt that I would eventually get there. I knew I had it, but I had to work in positions that was going to hone that. And so when I started my now 23-year career in higher ed, I started boots on the ground in recruitment. And when you start in recruitment, you start to know a little bit, but about a lot of things, if that makes sense. You have to know a little bit about admissions, a little bit about financial aid, a little bit about every department. And so I really started to spread my wings there. And then I went into the advisement and mentoring. And then I really started to hone that leadership of understanding number one, the great responsibility that comes with that, but also understanding that there's so much that you can do once you're there and when you're comfortable with that and how you're going to use that leadership for positive. And so I knew that it was there. I had to hone that and to get those experiences to get to where I needed to be. And I still feel there's a lot for me to learn. There's always more to learn, just like in life. And so I kind of knew that, but I had to figure out how to get there. And that only came through my work experiences. And of course, having a really strong mom, I saw her go to college every day at night. I remember her taking me to school with her in the evenings. And I sat in class with her, and I was 4 and 5, and I remember those. And seeing her doing that as a mother of 3, but she did it anyway. So I knew that was possible, seeing that example. So that was my experience.
Thank you.
Well, I'll share, we used to come up north here to Canadian Lakes for just as a vacation kind of thing. We bought our own vacation house. So we did that for about 5 years, and we loved it up here. So we said, why not move up here? And my husband found a job in Grand Rapids, and so we decided to make the move. And to me, that felt very vulnerable because we both had really good jobs downstate. And I was giving up my job, and I decided, my kids were young when my youngest was in preschool, that I would move up here and stay home for a little bit. So I did 2 years at home, a blessing. It was wonderful. And then for various reasons, my husband got downsized during the 2001, that era with everything went kind of upside down, and his IT company went bankrupt down in Grand Rapids. So at the same time, I knew life had to change, so this plant was opening, this production plant here for Ice Mountain. And I thought, well, I'll go apply. And I got that job. And I got it as a financial analyst because of my just business background. So I did that for about 2 years. And it was kind of a tough time in life because plans had changed. I realized I wasn't in control. I needed to go back to work, and it wasn't exactly in my timetable of what I was going to do right then. But because of my leadership and knowing what I needed to do for my family, I was going to make it a success. And it was a good 2 years, but then I saw this job get posted for a production planning supervisor. Now, I had no manufacturing background whatsoever. I could do the finance stuff and all, but I went and applied for the job. And I sat at a table for the interview, and there were, 5 or 6 guys there, and they were just shooting questions at me, all about this manufacturing stuff and what I would do if this line went down and that. And I just was inside thinking, well, this is never going to happen. But I kept my composure from, all my business experience and everything else. And, I ended up leaving that interviewing saying, well, that's okay. I'm fine as a financial analyst. This will be fine. Well, lo and behold, the next week I got the job. And my new manager said it was because, there were far more qualified people from a manufacturing perspective, because he had been watching, me do my job as a financial analyst, the way I handled myself in the interview. He said, that's the person we want. We can teach you the other stuff. You've got the business acumen, the way of dealing with people and that type of thing. But, here's where imposter syndrome comes in. I was in a room full, 7:30 meetings in the morning, room full of guys, manufacturing, very few women at the time, still on the operations side of things. And I actually had people working for me that had wanted my job. And so it was a humbling experience to not know anything. But just through treating people the right way, things that I was able to do, I was able to be successful in that job for 4 years. And then talk about the things coming at you. It was an international company at the time because Nestle owned us. And one day I had someone ask me, our national director was in, and he offered me a position to do this, what I'll call a consultant role, customer-facing supply chain manager. Because of all the big conference calls I've been on, your name is known outside of the 4 walls of this plant because we were, working on all kinds of things. And so they offered me this job, which has been an absolute godsend. I mean, it's been wonderful. I could stay in this community and grow because, I did a lot of travel, was now not working just with this plant, but with all our plants across. First it was regional and now it's national. I work with all the plants. So I've learned not only that 4 years that I worked as a production planning supervisor was pivotal in me understanding the whole manufacturing conglomerate and everything else that went with it. So it was a tough 4 years, and I remember the first few months getting phone calls in the middle of the night. This line has gone down, what do we do? They were looking to me for direction. This plant runs 24/7. I'm like, what have I gotten myself into? I literally thought one morning, I know I had a phone call last night, I remember nothing about it, but anyway, you'll find yourself in situations, and it's just throw yourself into it. And I'll tell you what, through all of my work with a network of executive women and all these panels I've seen with CEOs and all the leadership summits I've been to, they say oftentimes men will go for positions that they're not qualified for, maybe not that they're not qualified for, but they can only check some of the boxes on the requirements, right? And as women, we tend to stay more reserved and not do that. But I'll tell you, best thing I ever did was going for that job that I wasn't fully qualified for, and never looking back. So be brave.
Absolutely. As a senior, I hear that frequently. Mm-hmm. That is, Ferris students are told that story. That is used to encourage us a lot, and it works.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I have a fear of the fraud police in my mind. It's the fraud police, and as a joke, I coin it the frog police. And it's, you know, my insecurities bubble up every now and again. When I started teaching, one of the things that I had said to myself is I always knew I wanted to teach. But I also knew that when I was studying architecture, the people I most revered were the ones who had practical experience. So I felt I held myself to that same standard. And I knew what I was doing. There's no reason why when I started teaching why this should have been, you know, jumping in the front row at the University of Maryland, right? And I was paranoid that the frog police were going to come and point at me and say, aha, we caught you, you don't know what you're doing, do you? And that's reared its ugly head just throughout my life here and there. Sitting in my first meeting as interim dean, there were a lot of unhappy individuals that felt a little slighted from how the previous dean left. So that was my first meeting, and you know, I just kayed it up. I'm honest and straightforward, and I have a little bit of a sense of humor as I approach things as well. And it works, because when you show people respect and you show them your true self, hopefully you get that in return. You know, I in a previous life, I was an excellent athlete, even played professionally. I played soccer professionally. And I had played in Colorado. I was living in Vail at the time, and I was coaching an under 12 girls team. And it was a blast. I was having so much fun. And it amazed me, and I couldn't understand it, why I kept thinking that people were going to tell me that I didn't know how to run a practice session. Because I had been playing for how long, right? I've been playing practically my whole life. I'd excelled. I had played on 2 professional teams in Colorado. But there was this doubt, and I hate to say it, but it's driven by patriarchy. Mm-hmm. It's driven by patriarchy. Who were my coaches? Who were the people telling me I couldn't do this? Who were the people poking holes in what I valued as important or successful? And I won't say that of all men, but it was really something that I still struggle with at times, but I have to be very honest and surround myself with incredible women. Many of you are sitting here today that help me overcome and defeat the fraud police, my fraud police that they still come up. But I have a tendency to have better coping skills when that fraud police siren comes. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll have to use that.
The fraud police, right?
I just want to interject one thing too with this whole fraud or imposter syndrome. When it first came up a number of years ago, the first time I heard it in one of these leadership summits, imposter syndrome, I said, yeah, I get that, that's so true. So recently my son just finished medical school, he's in his residency now. And I asked him, I said, do they ever talk to you about imposter syndrome? He said, yeah, we have whole seminars on that. I said, even doctors, can have that feeling of, oh man, should I be in this role? So that was an eye-opener to me, that, whatever you're doing, even though you're trained for it, everyone has to get their experience.
Right.
So at that point, I just thought that was really interesting.
That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Busch, you answered this question a little bit with your previous answer.
Oh yeah, that's sitting down in front, yeah. Frog, I think that's great the way you kind of gave it an animal and like you can picture it and you can say no frog.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's a really good trick.
I like see the lights flashing too, seriously.
The frog has lights?
Because I'm so visual. Yeah, like it's.
That's so cool, I like it. Yeah.
Design.
Design that frog. Everybody can like have it, you know, and they graduate from Ferris.
I might be onto something.
You might be, yeah, it's a good one. Yeah. And I'm like you, like imposter syndrome, same thing. When I first heard of it, I'm like, oh, yes. I had that when I was doing my PhD. You know, I came from that really kind of more women-centered undergraduate, and I went to Georgetown, which is not, just say that much. There weren't many, there was one woman of color in my program, did not make it. A lot of women dropped out, smarter than me, dropped out. One got pregnant, you know, it's just not that kind of environment where you could be doing other things and succeed, especially if you're a woman. It's like one of those like work twice as hard to get half as far sorts of situations. So yeah, it was a little bit rough. They made me take my language test twice, both my French and my Russian, just to make sure. But I feel like when those things happen to me, they make me like doubly determined. Like I'm gonna make it, I'm gonna get there. And I did, you know, so it was always good. But it was a little hard too because in academia, at least in history, when you get your PhD, I'm hearing that this is happening now with PhDs where you almost have to be wealthy to get one because it's just you can't afford it otherwise. You need someone to support you financially. And it might have even been true when I was doing it because I pretty much worked full time while I was doing my PhD, which is very much a no-no. You're not supposed to do that. So yeah, I was not doing things the right way. So, but the good thing about doing it the wrong way was, the imposter syndrome where I'm not supposed to be a PhD definitely felt like I wasn't smart enough. The smart enough thing, that's I guess my one point. And then to Sonia's point about trying new things, I was working at the same time and I was doing things that I was also not qualified for. For example, I worked at the Federal Highway Administration and I'm not an engineer. Pretty much everyone in the office where I worked, I was a temporary. If anybody knows the GS levels, I was GS6, which is secretary. I was GS6 and they had to pretend like I didn't have a college degree to hire me because I was overqualified. So they kind of ignored that, they put that in. And this was 91, 92, also bad economic time, recession. I was happy to have anything, so I was a temporary GS6. And I'd just gotten back from Russia. I was there on a research grant for a whole year, fluent. And they're like, oh, yeah, you can type people's letters and make photocopies for us. And I was like, oh, this is not great. But all those white male engineers, the long story, I know this is probably to get this a little longer, was I eventually became an affirmative action hire back into that same office where I eventually just had to leave for another opportunity because they couldn't see me for what I was. I was right there in front of them. I was just what they needed to run their Russia program, but they could not see me. I was invisible to them. So I had to go out and do something very similar someplace else, and their hand was forced. They had to do an affirmative action hire, but I think, maybe they even thought about, like, maybe we'd like to hire her, but I think that it was an African-American woman from Michigan who was hired under the Clinton administration to run the Office of Policy. And she looked at the office I was in, which was international programs, and she said, "You are all white men. There's a problem here. You need more diversity." So I was one of them. There was another woman and an African-American man that they hired, 3 of us at one time. So I have some things to say about affirmative action too. Those people who like to naysay it, I think it's pretty important. And maybe we'll get to that question later.
Well, another excellent segue from Dr. Busch. One way or another, through plants or through Russia, you've become leaders now. And now that you're in this position, you have some kind of power, at least in the county, in Big Rapids. How do you use that power to include other people in what you're working on, and include other demographics in what you're working on?
Well, I think for me, I use the role that I'm in now is we work a lot with community partnerships, and that's my way to get West Michigan with Ferris, whether it's through networking opportunities, internship opportunities, but it's also a way for our programming that we do at the Hispanic Latino Cultural Center to expose other students to the programming that we do here. There are some students that aren't familiar with any of our cultures, our traditions, what we do, the food we eat, and just don't know anything about it, just they've never been exposed to it. Through no fault of their own, that's just not what their experience has been. So in my role, I take that piece of it and that component very seriously. And I think it's also equally important that the students that are affiliated with the center, that they all are primarily Hispanic Latino students, although we do see a diverse group going through there pretty frequently, but primarily they all are Hispanic Latino students. It's imperative that we expose them to other cultures that they may not be familiar with as well. So that's another component that I take very seriously about my role as well. So when we do programming throughout the year, I'm very cognizant to have a good mix of those things. As much as we want to teach others about our culture and experiences, it is equally important for our students to learn about other cultures, to learn about those experiences as well. It's a mutual exchange. So in my role, I take that very, very seriously when I think about our programming. And whenever I have an event, like 2 hours ago, we did a peaceful march around campus to celebrate and honor the advocacy of Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta and the work that they did for the farm workers. We were just there, and that was an event that was not just for our students and our registered organizations to host and lead, but it's also an opportunity from students across campus, faculty members, staff members. That invite goes out to everyone for them to come, learn, and celebrate and honor that work. So in my role, I take that component of it very seriously in terms of making sure that everyone is included in that messaging.
Absolutely.
Well, I do feel a great sense of responsibility, right? Because I heard a quote this morning, and I actually wrote it down because I'm like, that's exactly right for the whole women's movement. And it was actually Sir Isaac Newton said this, but he said, if I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. So he's talking about the science world and all that he accomplished. But I interpreted that, you could talk about women too. And when you were talking about your experience and the men couldn't see you, you were a secretary. Oh my gosh, it just took me back to the book. I read Lessons in Chemistry with my book club, and it's also on Hulu or one of the streaming, but it was a woman scientist, brilliant, but back in the 50s, 60s, they weren't recognized. So she was getting coffee for the other scientists, and doing her work on the slide. But, we were given the opportunity by the women that when I came into the workforce, in the 80s, fortunately, and I'm sure there was still some of it going on, but I never felt like I was to get the coffee for anybody else or whatever. I was accepted and, whatever. But there were women that experienced that, and some still do. And so we do have an obligation to continue that work that the others did before us. So if I see something, a woman that maybe, or somebody's talking over someone else or just not getting, I either take the person aside, kind of give them some mentoring, but that's exactly what I do through the business resource group at the company and the network of executive women, that I'm on that. We do leadership programs to help college students too, and mentor them. And then anything that I do, like I've gone probably 5 or 6 times to the annual conference. Last September was the last one I was to. Great speakers, we're talking CEOs and just great things that have happened. And I bring that back to our business resource, Women of Blue Triton, and share that with others to help them too. So talking about things like exactly what, we are here, imposter syndrome, and women, you need to go out and apply for the jobs. You don't have to have every box checked on that role to do it. So.
I feel so responsible for being able to bring exposure, cultural exposure, different types of experiences to the students. And as in my role this year as interim dean for the College of Engineering Technology, it's been incredibly insightful for me. Of over 60 faculty, 7 identify as female. And I believe that there's 4 that are minorities. And it's unacceptable. So it's starting right in my backyard, right? How do I deal with this? So it's looking for and empowering some of the females in my office to write grants so that we can start hiring diverse individuals, because we need that in the engineering technology fields, in the construction fields, in automotive. Because when students sit in classrooms and see who they're learning from, it's so impactful. So that's the first step that was just so glaringly obvious to me. Something else that I've done this year is on a more macro level. I went to a conference in Mexico just a couple of weeks ago, and it was for deans and directors for the colleges of built environments, so construction, architecture, anything that has to do with engineering. And it was to speak about opportunities of education across borders and where those hang-ups are and where we can actually start to make inroads. And so networking is so important, to be able to share who I have experience with in my past with students that I've had. Because then when I can make those connections, they can start to create their own stories. And now, with all of these wonderful people that I've met in Mexico, it was the Deans of the Americas, so it was South America, North America, Central. It was everybody was there for the same exact reason. And it was magical. It was in Puebla, Mexico, so that also was awesome. I ate as many different dishes of mole as I could, just to let you know. But that also just speaks to culture and understanding that when you have an open mind, a lot of these opportunities come naturally, right? And that's what I need to teach our students. Yeah, it can be scary. Yeah, but guess what? It could be amazing. And whether it's an opportunity to study abroad, whether it's an exchange, whether it's a long weekend, go do it. How can I get you there? How can we get you to do that? How can we do an internship with my manufacturing students in Mexico, with my plastic students in Brazil? There's so many wonderful opportunities, and just all of these ideas were just spawned from going out to dinner with my brand new friends in Puebla. And so that's what empowers me and excites me, so that I can pass these along to the students. It's really serving the students. And I do know that through these initiatives, we could have faculty exchanges as well, and we could really start to raise the bar and make Ferris even stronger with a more international flavor, and make it and maybe even make it more competitive, as that's where it takes us.
Bring Ferris some flavor.
Bring Ferris some flavor, right?
Some mole.
Mole, yes.
Well, I'd like to segue from what Sonia said about Dolores Huerta. I know I don't speak Spanish, so maybe I mispronounced her name, but she came to Ferris early in my career here. We were actually creating the non-tenure track union, and she's a union person. So
Yes.
to have her win behind our sales is like, oh my goodness. And there's one thing she said that stuck with me. I think about it every time I'm afraid. Every time I'm on the picket line or doing something that maybe not advisable. I hear, she says, people power. People power. She's like, you might feel afraid, but you don't underestimate the power of just standing up, like you're standing in front of a store or wherever it is, representing your beliefs that might not be popular. The power of the person standing there. And I think, because sometimes you're afraid, right? But then you just have to say, well, the power of me standing here is something. Like I have an energy, and so you just, I think, speak up, right? Speak up. Do the thing that you want to do. I mean, it had to be super scary for her. Are you kidding me? So I will never forget that message. And so I think it's so cool that you talked about that march around campus.
She's a spitfire. She's a ball of energy.
Yeah.
So I heard about that visit that she made here. So that's amazing.
Yeah, it was life changing. Back in 2000, when did we organize? 2013, something.
That's incredible.
It was before
About
my
10
time,
years,
yeah.
probably about 10 years
That's
ago.
amazing.
Yeah. So there was that. I wanted to mention that. Also, what you said, Kate, about, I wrote down difficulty coming to FSU. I'm trying to remember why you said it was difficult. Early on. Oh, because of probably the fact you have so few women in your program. I had trouble in my first years at Ferris too. My problem was I came from DC. I was in DC, and my friends were so diverse. I mean, and I came here and everyone was so white. I was like, oh, I can't handle this. It was really hard. And since then, of course, we have there used to be Latino Center. Like that was created. We have Ferris Women's Network now that did not exist before. FMLA only in my wildest dreams. It exists now. We have, we have the MOSO. David Pilgrim tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Let's do it." And I'm like, yes. I was a little afraid though. Being called a feminist not that long ago was not a good thing on this campus. And things have changed. Things have really changed in affairs, and things have gotten a lot better. And I'm glad you feel like they can get better yet, even more better.
Boy.
More better.
Always more better.
Yeah, more better. So yeah, I would say that was a difficulty. And of course, remembering that the woman of color who dropped out, I mean, history is a very white, male-dominated still discipline. So maybe I can do some things in my classroom I've been trying to do in my classroom, remembering my own affirmative action, heritage that I have. Like, what can I do, to not engage, implicit bias, not to be, even women can be sexist, right? We have to watch ourselves. Racism is, as we've learned from George Floyd and, all the lessons we have been learning through, I highly recommend White Fragility as a book, History of White People. There's a lot of learning we can do about our own history and our own selves. So we have to work on ourselves. Like you said, we're always learning new things. We have to work on ourselves constantly. There's a lot of work to be done. And when we're working on ourselves and we model that to our students, I think that can be really powerful. And to be humble too. Like sometimes we don't get it right. Sometimes we get it wrong. It's like, oh, I got it wrong. Do better next time.
I think to that point, it's great that we can say, yes, I did that and I'm proud of that work. But I think it's equally awesome when we say, you know what, I got that wrong and I learned now. It's a learning moment, it's a learning opportunity. I'm a big believer that if you got it wrong, own up to it and say it, you know what, I got it wrong, but this is how we're gonna fix it. And I think it's equally powerful, just as that as well, that component. So I agree with that.
Because we're professors, right? We're leaders, and it's a lot of responsibility, and but it's also a beautiful place to be, right? Because by this point in our life, I'm 54 too. You kind of have some ideas, like this is what I want to change. This is what I want to do.
Yes, we'll
Yeah,
have
so-
our own little network.
Yeah, like this is, and there's beautiful, brilliant students that I have, and sometimes they stay in touch with me, and it's just so, this is the best profession, I feel. I know you love your profession too, but I just love higher ed. I think it's, because we're always, every single semester we have new clientele, right? There's constantly new ideas coming through, 100 new students every semester that I'm learning from every semester. And then they graduate and they go out and they stay in touch, and it's just this huge,
And
beautiful thing.
Tracy, just what you said, it's also this exchange. It isn't teaching, but we're learning from.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so important, right? Because exactly, we're always working on ourselves. And I think that's exactly the key. That's the exchange where when you accept that, there's respect that's established on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things keeping me from retirement. I toy with it because I'm getting up there. I'm not 54. Add quite a bit to that, but
55.
My thing is I love learning every day, and when I'm not learning anymore, that's when I don't want to be. But you meet so many people through your job, and you learn so many, because every person's so different, whether it's customers or, the organization changes all the time, and so there's always new things to learn.
Absolutely. I wrote down no punishment for failure from Cato
Yes, I
Howell.
will do that.
Resonates with a lot of us. And I want to be mindful of time, though I could stay here forever personally. So if we could wrap up with each panelist giving one piece of advice to the future leaders that are at Ferris now, what would that advice be?
Wow. I guess for me, that's a great question. And you're doing awesome, by the way. I would say for our future leaders, the one thing that I would want you all to take away is, number one, have fun. Have fun. Yes, it's a job. Yes, it's important work. But remember, at the end of the day, we're all team members. We don't go into higher ed to get rich. We do not. We do not go into higher ed to get rich. So we're here because we're truly service-oriented people, or we're supporting our colleges and students through internships, networking opportunities, and coming here to share their knowledge with us because we're service-oriented people. So it's important that we understand that at the end of the day, sometimes we're not going to agree. No, maybe that event won't. Well, no, I don't agree, and I don't like that agenda. We're going to disagree because we're human. But we're all human, just trying to do the very best we can every day. And we're all here to have the same agenda, which is to serve our students and give them the best experience possible. And understanding, if you have that in your heart, in whatever you do, if you go into corporate America, you go into teaching, you go into whatever it is that you're going to go into, is understanding that your colleagues, your teammates, they're all there for the majority are there for the common reason of having the same goal and agenda, and have a good time with it. Yes, we all have bills to pay at the end of the day, and I understand that, but if you're doing truly what you love every day, you're going to hear this over and over, and it is very true. If you find what you love to do every day, you're not going to feel like you're going to work. In my current role, working with students every day, I have a blast every day. Sometimes I cry with them because they're going through financial hardship, or their parents are giving them a hard time because they want them to come back home, because that's very much in our culture, is letting your children go live on their own is a big deal, and they go through different things. But at the end of the day, seeing them walk across the stage is just the most wonderful thing, and having them reach back out to you is amazing. So as a leader, have a good time, find what you love to do, put your heart and soul into it, and you're going to be a happy camper. That's what my advice would be.
That's good, and that's why I'm here, right? Because I enjoy this type of stuff and enjoy being able to share some of the things that have worked for me. And when I got the invitation from Julie not too long ago, I thought, I've got such a busy schedule and all, that I want to work all day and go to this. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? You're going to meet new people. You're going to do something you haven't done before. And I'm totally impressed, Jessica, like you doing this. I'm envisioning the big leadership conferences I've been on with the Megatrons, 3 across, and all these CEOs up there, and the moderators doing what you're doing. And here you are doing it in college because you want to, and you're stretching yourself. So You use the word curious. It's always been a mantra of mine. I think that's why I have been so successful in new endeavors, is because I want to know. And so I'll dig deeper and, spend the time. And that's exactly what you're doing here when you're here and coming to things like this. So kudos to what you're doing here.
Thank you so much.
I think be kind to yourself.
That's good.
You can say no. You can say no. Have empathy. Have compassion. Accept challenges. And fail. And celebrate the failures. And to quote Ted Lasso, right? Be curious, not judgmental.
Right, so.
Absolutely.
Oh, me, okay.
Take us home.
Oh, that's such a hard one. I think that confidence, the imposter syndrome situation, I wish I could go back and tell myself to not sweat it, but then again, that's just part of it too. I think it's just a normal process of, your parents bring you up, but then you have to bring yourself up too. Like you have to kind of take charge of yourself at some point and decide, okay, how brave am I going to be? Like, is this battle worth fighting? And I know a problem I have, but it might be also a positive, is I get an idea in my head and I stick with it. Like maybe it would have been better to just leave the job and do something new, but I just was bound and determined. So maybe my advice to you all would be, if you're like me, you don't have to stick with something that's not working for you. Maybe say goodbye to it and try something new. I'm just a very stubborn person, and I get that from my mother. It always ended up okay with me. Like I made it through my PhD. I ended up coming back and running my Russia program like I wanted to run it. So maybe sticking with it is the right thing, but only inside yourself what's the best path. So I'd say it's a really hard question to answer because we're where we are right now because of what we did. And so it's hard. It's like a counterfactual. Like you have to imagine, like, what could I have done better, and would things have turned out a little bit better for me? But I think I'm one of those people who, like everyone here, who kind of likes challenges. I get that sense from all of you that you like challenges. So enjoy the challenge, I suppose, would be the last words.
Beautiful way to end this. Thank you all again so much. I've learned so much. Thank you for coming here. Thank you to Ferris Women's Network. Thank you to TDMP.
And then I'll say on behalf of Ferris Women's Network, thank you so much to our panelists. You did a fantastic job. And also, can we get a huge hand for the All right, thank you everybody. Have a lovely evening.